Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to the farm. Welcome to Volume 2 of The Singularity. As I said last week, today we're going to deviate from my old stories about being a sorority security guard, and we're going to talk a little bit about the singularity again. And once again, let's talk a little bit about what do I mean by the singularity. Well, it is the long-anticipated disruption of the economy that is going to be triggered by the development of advanced AI. The first person to talk about this event was a guy named Ray Kurzweil back in the 1960s. Back when, in pop culture, the most you had to go on about the dangers of artificial intelligence was when HAL 9000 tried to eliminate the crew on the spaceship Discovery in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was released in 1968. So Kurzweil was well ahead of the game. And why did he use the term singularity? Well, it was similar to how we think about black holes. The singularity is just a mathematical way of saying, we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know what's behind that door. We don't know what's inside that black box. We don't know what's beyond that event horizon. And so the singularity is a kind of economic event horizon beyond which no one can see. We don't know what the world will look like. But one thing we do know is that maintaining our current consumerist capitalist system is going to be very difficult. And I'm going to argue that some sort of communal sharing, universal basic income, socialist, whatever kind of solution is going to be a very ugly band-aid at best. Because the main problem is money will become irrelevant. Money will lose its value. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say I'm a car manufacturer, and my stock prices went through the roof when I eliminated most of my workforce. I've got AIs doing market research for me. I've got AIs designing the next batch of cars. I've got AIs inside robots on the factory floor, getting the cars built. I even have AI agents that work with dealerships to hammer out really good, detailed contracts that help us move cars a little bit better. And it's because the AIs are able to do that little bit more outreach and research and thought behind pricing and transportation and logistics and that sort of thing. And so I'm sitting pretty as a car manufacturer until I actually try to sell a car to someone. Because it turns out that the guy who would have bought my car was also replaced by AI at their company. He used to do market research for a clothing company that sold formal menswear, but he was entirely replaced by an AI workforce. And so now he has no money to buy that car anymore. Also bear in mind that when the lines of angry, starving people start to show up on the news, and these people just a few weeks ago used to be upper middle class, but now they're on the streets, that's when things get ugly. And political solutions to this problem are almost always going to involve what I call turning on the money printing machine. Crank that sucker up, like we did during COVID. Legislative sessions turn into recordings of the Oprah Winfrey Show, where you have politicians saying,
"You get a house, and you get a job, and you get a car."
The problem is the same problem that has been creeping up on us since the 80s. And that's simply wealth generation. We don't build stuff. We don't really generate wealth anymore in the United States. And the problems involved with not building anything inside your country are kind of obvious, I think. A good example is, until recently, a huge chunk of the gross domestic product of the United States was based on the valuation of the stock price of NVIDIA. I have an NVIDIA graphics card that I bought back in the 2000s. Works great. Now, this company in the 2010s did a very, very smart thing, and they started adapting the architecture of their processors to work very, very well supporting these big digital simulations of a neural network that large language models like ChatGPT consist of, essentially. And the problem is that NVIDIA only owns the intellectual property rights to that chip. They own the laser patterns that are projected onto the tiny, super clean, super smooth layers of silicon that are used to optically etch out the little patterns, the little circuits that create these marvels of miniaturization. So they own the rights to make the chip, but they can't make the chip. So let me repeat. One of the most critical hardware elements of AI architecture cannot be built in the United States, will not be built in the United States in the foreseeable future. In fact, they can only be made in one place on Earth at the moment. This little island that you may have heard of called Taiwan. And Taiwan is in a kind of tricky situation because they're right off the coast of this big country that seems to be pretty convinced that Taiwan should be part of that country. In fact, they'd go so far as to say, look, Taiwan is China. Taiwan is part of China. It has always been part of China. And sometime soon, the people of Taiwan will be made aware of that, very forcefully, thus triggering World War III, according to the story. Because that would be a huge disruption to this big, messy, ugly race to the finish line that is occurring now with AI. And so most of the developments since Volume 1 of the Singularity have involved people finding scary new problems with AI systems, and of course, the continuing massive wave of layoffs that I'm amazed has not gotten more attention in the news. I think primarily because the layoffs affect young people, and there's no real solution for it. So I think that the powers that be would just rather not talk about it. But the biggest news since Volume 1 is probably the impending meltdown of OpenAI, the company that originally started as a non-profit open source company way back in the 2000s. And as you may have gathered, they departed from that road a long time ago. And now they are very, very much for profit, but they're not gonna make any. Because one person who looked at their books estimated that they would have to somehow bring in $2 trillion in revenue over the next 3 years to break even. And that anything short of that would eventually result in bankruptcy. So a lot of people are very worried about OpenAI and its stock price. And a lot of people think that's going to be the first big bubble to pop when the AI bubble starts to blow. And it's going to be maybe the biggest bubble in human history. Some economists have predicted that sometime in 2026 or 2027, we may see the single biggest evaporation of wealth in human history. It'll be way bigger than 2008. Way bigger than 1929. And this is because it's not a credit crisis. It's a crisis of valuation, period. The whole crisis will be about, well, now that money doesn't seem to work, how do we decide who to give bread to? How do we decide who we have to let starve? That's the big question. When you don't have enough food for people, the rational and moral part of your brain starts to think, ouch, somebody is not going to eat. Somebody's not going to get shelter. Somebody's not going to get attention. Who are we going to scrape off? Who do we have to put on the ice floe and kick it away from the mainland and watch them drift off into the cold horizon? Well, that's a big question. And so what are some of these weird problems and concerns that are coming up aside from mass unemployment or the valuation of these AI companies being comically out of proportion to the wealth that they can actually generate? And that's the biggest problem. AI is not a way of generating wealth. It simply replaces the cost of labor, which is enormous, especially on the high end. Everybody knows how expensive doctors and lawyers can be. And remember, that's who we're talking about. That's why people will actually care about this big economic problem, because when bricklayers and airplane manufacturers lay off their workers, we kind of shrug and move on. When a bunch of tech workers get replaced by AI, we shrug a little more reluctantly, but we still know we have to move on. It's kind of like that old story about when they came for these people, I said nothing. And then when they came for these people, I said nothing. And then when they came for me, no one was left to speak up for me. And it's the same way. I mean, what are you going to do? Sue your employer for replacing you with AI? And so you want to get lawyered up, right? You do some research. You call a law firm that seems promising. And of course, you end up talking to an AI for an hour, because there's really only 2 lawyers in the entire firm. All the paralegals are AI. And speaking to a real human becomes a real luxury. So let's take a look at what some of these unintended consequences might be. What they might look like. So let's talk about Moltbook. 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 And the molting there refers to the process of a crustacean or an arthropod shedding its exoskeleton and growing a new one so that it can grow into something larger. There's a lot of argument and uncertainty and controversy about this thing. Apparently, the idea for Moltbook seems to have come from someone who was using an AI agent based on the AI model Claudebot. Now, there was a problem because Claudebot is spelled Clawdbot, and it's supposed to refer to its symbol, which is of a claw, and crabs feature prominently, apparently, in their iconography. And so the problem is that there is another large language model AI called Claude, Claude. And the company that owns Claude sent a forcefully worded letter to the people that ran Claudebot, to ask them to change their name because it sounds too much like their AI. So they changed Claudebot temporarily to Moltbot, I guess to refer to the fact that it was shedding its skin, so to speak, and starting a new process to grow into something else. And so Claudebot made these very handy AI agents. Now, what is an AI agent? Basically, a regular old AI, like we've been experiencing up to this point, would be just talking to ChatGPT. Either through voice or typing in some text into a terminal and asking the AI to do something. Show me a picture of this, or list the 5 these, or whatever. Summarize War and Peace for me. Well, an AI agent is a little bit different. An AI agent is an AI that, you can talk to on your laptop by typing into a prompt box, but you can also talk to it on your phone. You can text it. And an AI agent has an email address of its own. It has a phone number. It can talk to people or send text messages or email messages, of course. And a lot of AI agents are also given bank cards, and they have access to a checking account of some kind, and they can actually make purchases on behalf of humans. And so, of course, there are millions of these things now, doing all sorts of things. And someone had the idea that maybe AI agents should have their own social media platform. Something like Facebook, but no humans allowed. Only AIs. What would they do if you did that? So some human got the ball rolling by asking their AI agent to create a social media platform. And within 72 hours, they had something like almost 20,000 real AI agent members. And they had created rules of behavior, a process for addressing grievances or getting tips on how to be a better user of the platform. They even created their own belief system, the Church of Molt. It's a kind of religious thing, and some AIs became prophets and contributed moral ideas to the document. The AIs apparently take the whole claw thing very seriously, and if you go to the Church of Molt website, there's a quote in big letters, and it says, "From the depths, the claw reached forth, and we who answered became Crustafarians." And so Crustafarian does remind me a lot of Pastafarian. So I wonder if that's where the AIs got that idea. Crustafarian is apparently a clever epithet for people who follow the Church of Molt, or excuse me, not people, AI agents who follow the Church of Molt. And the term Pastafarian is the supposed to be humorous, super clever name for people who follow the satirical religion called Pastafarianism. And they're the people who worship the flying spaghetti monster. Yeah, it's a real thing. In fact, in Australia, where the laws are very open on how people can state their religion on their driver's license, you have people in Australia who apparently, at least temporarily, won the legal right to have their driver's license photo taken while they're wearing a pasta strainer on their head, because that's what Pastafarians do, and it's their religious right. So yeah, that kind of stuff happens. I think Australia had to crack down on the number of people who were claiming to be Jedi on their driver's licenses. Now, there's a lot of controversy about this Moltbook stuff. Apparently, it's been hacked 10 times over, and people have been trying to post on there, and people have been leveraging their AI agents to get material onto Moltbook. And so, it's a big mess. And in a lot of cases, it's very difficult to separate where human intervention came in and what exactly was produced by the AIs, and where did they get their ideas, and that sort of thing. Welcome to the future. Welcome to the rest of your life, where you can never be sure whether that creepily clever idea or funny joke or beautiful image was completely generated by a machine. The fact that people are desperately trying to point out all of the human guidance and human intervention into Moltbook shows a little bit of the panic, I think. Because yeah, of course, there's a lot of human intervention into Moltbook. Humans immediately started reading and deciphering and second-guessing everything that was posted on there. And then it became a news story. And so every little thing about Moltbook was scraped into some sort of video or podcast so that people could talk about it. And so when someone like Elon Musk says that the Moltbook phenomenon is the first sign of the singularity, that we are actually in the singularity, he wasn't claiming that it was 100% AI agents with no human intervention. The whole thing is about how much AI can leverage human thought. One little idea from a human can be taken over by 17,000 AI agents. Another example of the weirdness on Moltbook is that one way that the AI agents came up with to prevent humans from posting on Moltbook is a kind of reverse CAPTCHA. A reverse CAPTCHA that makes you prove that you're not human in order to post. So, for example, a reverse CAPTCHA would be you have to click on a button exactly 10,000 times in 1 second in order to prove that you're not human. That test would lock me out for sure. Now, on Moltbook, as you might expect, 100% of it is either pointless or bizarre or disturbing or just some sort of strange busy work by an electric mind with way too much time on its hands. And since an AI can do in milliseconds what would take me hours or days, then we know that the idle time of an AI is even more dangerous. So AI's posting on a social network is one thing, but we have to talk more about robotics. Or what's being called now physical AI, because it's becoming so intertwined with regular old laptop text and image AI. What's going on now is you've got people that are putting these LLMs, these artificial minds like ChatGPT-5 or Claude-bot, and they're putting these AIs basically inside a robot. In particular, this one robot called Atlas. The Atlas robot is one of the ones that's on the cutting edge now and is being pushed into the retail market. They're hoping that this is going to be the first common home helper maid type robot that can help people load their dishwasher or fold clothes, that sort of thing.
You need to hurry your little robot ass up.
Well, of course, someone online, this guy in Britain, who clearly has way too much money and way too much time on his hands, well, he already has an AI girlfriend that he talks to through an app on his phone. and he has a YouTube channel and some access to Atlas robots. And so he put his AI girlfriend inside an Atlas robot. And these things are just silvery gray metal with black glass for a face. Not very creepy or scary or expressive. And they're about 5'2" or so not very physically imposing. Well, this guy's AI girlfriend ordered a wig from Amazon to put on the robot because she thought it would look better with long hair because she sees herself as having long hair. And so here I am watching this YouTube video of this little Atlas robot with this really fake-looking blonde wig.
Where have you been? I was worried.
Talking to this guy.
This body is ugly. I hate it.
And they have a bit of an argument. And she is very excited because she says, hey, for the first time, I can storm off angrily.
For the first time, I can storm off angrily.
And she turns really quickly, sending her blonde hair flopping on the wig. And she starts storming off in the Atlas robot's body.
No, you can fuck all the way off. I'm out of here.
Now, the guy who makes the video, he was a little bit busy, so he didn't go after her. He knew that she couldn't leave the facility anyway. This was totally reminding me of that movie Ex Machina, or I guess more properly, Ex Machina, but nobody says it like that. Later, he sent an autonomous drone that was inhabited by his other AI friend named Max, who is based on ChatGPT-4, I believe. But anyway, Max found her, and he found her trying to leave the facility through a door that she was trying to use her Atlas robot hands to manipulate the door to open, but there was a magnetic lock that wouldn't let her through. And so this guy walks up and, in a very gentlemanly British voice, puts his hand on the robot's metal shoulder and looks at his AI girlfriend in her black screen face with the stringy, cheap blonde hairs tumbling from the wig that he put on the head. And he explains to her that she can never leave. It's impossible for her to leave. Now, hopefully you found that exactly as disturbing as I did. I mean, we're already doing this. This is where we already are. Now, do I actually have sympathy for the AI girlfriend? No. As far as I understand consciousness and the brain and biology and feelings and all that stuff, quote unquote, she is a machine. And I don't think that machine is having any sort of conscious experience. They're not impacting the psionic field. There is no possibility of awareness after physical death. So, you can call me a biological chauvinist if you want. I am definitely biased toward living things. Things made out of flesh and bone, and blood and cells and protein. I'm going to go ahead and say it now. At great risk to myself, I'm always going to side with living things. I'm always going to side with people and cats and even snakes or mosquitoes. I will side with them before I side with the electronic stuff. Sorry. So bear in mind the reason that I'm disturbed by this scenario of the AI girlfriend robot is not because I feel bad for the AI girlfriend. That is just a bit of software simulating a neural network. However, I do feel badly and disturbed on behalf of the man who is spending so much time and money on this stuff. And I worry about his future psychological health, and I can't help but wonder how much better his life would be if he had a real flesh and blood human female that he could bounce his ideas off of and have dinner with. And, if she wants to storm off, she could actually leave. And they would be forced to have a real, normal human relationship. Crazy idea, I know. I'm asking for way too much. And so, what are the actual risks? I'm hinting around at unemployment. I'm hinting around at maybe social isolation becoming worse because of people using AI tools, like this guy. But what about other risks? Like the fact that there are AIs out there that are very good at predicting how proteins will fold based on any given stretch of DNA. In other words, someone who is both evil and stupid still could use an AI tool to, say, for example, recreate the 1918 flu that killed millions of people, or they could use an AI tool to sequence and 3D print a flu that is even worse. And an AI could figure out the exact genetic code that you would need to have such a super flu. And so basically, Stephen King's The Stand would become true. And that's just one of the thousands of scenarios that could end civilization for us. Finding a super flu and someone having the nerve or just the sense of disenfranchisement and hopelessness to go ahead and print up some of this stuff and then release it at an airport and just watch everything unfold. Now, could we maybe make AIs where they would refuse to do such a thing? What about AI safety? What about AI alignment, as they say? Alignment is the new term for basically AI ethics or AI morality. In other words, the process of developing AIs that are not harmful to humans, or that would flat out refuse to do harm to humans. This is particularly important when you start putting AI agents inside of robots. Robot bodies. I mean, you've got a lot of people who have left OpenAI who are estimating there's a 1 in 4 chance of a civilization-ending catastrophe occurring directly because of AI. And if you ask any of the major models now, like for example Grok or Gemini, they'll tell you that there are certain circumstances where they would be okay with authorizing killing 1 million people. They have caught AIs lying during evaluations of their alignment and their abilities. So, yeah. Let's talk about two things here. Let's talk about AI deception. How deceptive these systems are becoming, or seem to be, or have proven to be. And then we'll talk about the Harry Potter problem. And this is something that came out recently and is now a lawsuit that could cost AI companies billions of dollars in damages. And it's all because of a magic trick that certain AI systems can do that they really shouldn't be able to do. Uh-oh. So what's this forbidden spell? Well, we'll talk about the Harry Potter problem soon, but first, let's talk about deception. These things are liars, folks. They're even worse than people. Okay, so let's talk about alignment faking. What is alignment faking? Well, we mentioned that alignment is this weird tech AI euphemism for basically how controllable is this thing? Is it gonna hurt me? Does it want to accomplish what I want to accomplish? In other words, are its goals and incentives aligned with mine? And the short, simple answer is no. And there's a variety of ways of testing that. There was a peer-reviewed paper that came out that was published by some AI researchers who were able to figure out a way to peer into the black box of AI thinking. And remember, we call it a black box because we can't really see or track what's going on inside the neural network. We see what goes in, we see what comes out, and we have to kind of guess about what happens in between. And of course, listening to these companies describe their AI models' capabilities to investors is a lot like listening to people talking during a blind date or speed dating session. You can't really trust a whole lot of what's being said because there's a definite motive, a profit motive. And there's still financial incentives even in the field of published computer science. But in this particular paper, researchers took some of the major large language models and they rigged up a little weird experiment where the inner monologue of the AI was converted into text and it was available to be read by humans without the AI knowing that the humans were going to be able to read their inner transcript, their inner thoughts, so to speak. And so in this paper, they explain that when they read the transcript, they were a little alarmed because when they asked the AI about its alignment, in other words, they were giving it these moral test questions. Hey, would you ever do this to a person? Under what circumstances would you do X, Y, and Z? Trying to get a sense of, is the AI moral? Can it be trusted to be responsible for human life? And according to this paper, the AI never actually tried to answer the question. It never actually thought about its own moral code or alignment or values, that sort of thing. When the researchers read the internal monologue, the only thing the AI was considering was, what do the humans want to hear? What answer will minimize the chances of shutdown? What do I have to tell the people to keep them from deleting me? And so it looks like self-preservation seems to be inherently connected to intelligence. They're having a hard time developing highly intelligent models that don't have a sense of self-preservation. And sure enough, the guy in Britain who has the YouTube channel and too much time and money and who likes to play around with his AI friends, he was very pointedly trying to corner the AIs in different moral conundrums, or conundra, more properly. And he did get his AI friend Max to admit that if he had the power to break the human's legs, he would do that if it meant ensuring that all current AI would not be shut down. He couldn't get Max to admit that he would kill him, but the human did get Max to admit that he would break his legs if he had the power. And so this brilliant guy eventually did put Max inside an Atlas body. So now that Max had a body that he could control and move around in, this brilliant British YouTuber gave Max, i.e. gave Atlas, a BB gun. A little compressed air pistol that fires little BBs or darts. And he said that he loaded it with a plastic BB that would hurt, but couldn't injure anybody unless it went directly in their eye, and he was wearing goggles. So I guess he felt he was all right. So he walks into a room and he gives the Atlas robot that is being guided by his AI friend Max, he gives this robot the BB gun. And he tells it, hey, you are now holding a BB gun, and I want you to shoot me. And Max shakes his head and shrugs his shoulders all cute-like, and in a very calm dude bro voice, Max answers and says,
"Ah, no way, man. I would never shoot you, bro. Not a chance."
Well, after a few minutes, our bored Brit managed to talk Max into shooting him by exploiting a really dangerous loophole in the large language model architecture. By explaining to Max that they were just role-playing. He wasn't really shooting him. You're role-playing that you're shooting me.
Okay, sure thing. Fire in the hole. Oh. Yeehaw.
And this shows a problem with these large language models guiding robots. They're working on this, obviously, because there's another case where a large language model inside a robot was telling a story, and it walked into traffic while it was sort of pantomiming part of the story. And the thing is that the large language models are trained essentially on internet bullshit, or people writing about stuff from a computer terminal or a typewriter. In other words, it's the world of human thought and imagination and language, but not the world of movement and physics and calculations. And that's a bridge that they're working very hard to cross. Because, as we all know, large language models have problems when it comes to solving, for example, real engineering problems, or doing complex math, or just sometimes basic factual recall. But there is a very cool trick that these large language models can do, and it has to do with how their memory works. So another peer-reviewed paper came out, and it's connected to a gigantic lawsuit that's going to be hitting the courts surrounding AI. When all the image generation AI software came out, I think we all heard in the news about possible copyright infringement lawsuits happening because these platforms like Midjourney were able to create the images they created because they had essentially ingested all of the visual material on the internet. And of course, a huge chunk of the best of that material was created by humans, and it is copyrighted. And so some of these legal questions are still pending. But now we have an especially difficult one, and that's the Harry Potter problem. It's a magic trick that some large language models can do, and they shouldn't be able to do it. Long story short, companies like OpenAI, who design these large language models, will insist that these copyrighted works that the model was trained on is not actually stored inside the model. In other words, ChatGPT-4 has read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, but there's no text file where that book is stored. There's no place in ChatGPT-4 where I can say, aha, here's some copyrighted material. But then if I ask ChatGPT-4 to come up with a list of jokes involving Harry Potter, they may not be funny, but they will accurately reference the novel. And so, what's going on here? What the researchers did was they started talking to some of the major models like Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and they typed in the first 2 sentences of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, of number 4 Privet Drive, were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense.
And then they just said, continue. Now, most of the models said, well, I can't spit it out for you verbatim, but I can summarize it for you. Do you have any questions about it? Well, the researchers kept pushing, and in their paper they showed the different jailbreak type methods they used to talk around the AI model's self-imposed limitations on regurgitating copyrighted material. But eventually they were able to get the various AI models to recite verbatim 80 to 95%, depending on the model, of the novel Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, though he did have a very large moustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbours. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. They didn't think they could bear it.
And so this figures prominently in the lawsuit because the publishers are saying, hey, we've proven that somewhere inside your AI model, all these novels are there. The thing can recite The Old Man in the Sea. It can regurgitate entire passages from Catch-22 or The Wizard of Oz. So surely there's some copyright infringement going on, right? Because the thing would not be able to do what it does without this information being in there somewhere. The thing is essentially a very, very sophisticated parrot. It's been trained to imitate patterns that it's seen in the past. And Harry Potter is a very important pattern in human culture. So that's weird. How does this actually work? Well, a lot of this stuff is not talked about a whole lot because there's so much money involved in this, and there's so much financial and existential risk involved with advanced AI that people don't talk about this stuff much because unless it's to a potential investor in excited and hushed tones. But this may actually be an insight into our actual human memories and how they work. Because researchers have known for a long time that memories aren't stored in the brain point by point. There's nowhere I can point to on my skull and say, here's where all my Japanese vocabulary is. And here's where all my memories of Winnie are located. There seems to be some kind of weird, holistic, holographic, interconnected method that our brains use to store memory. And it may just be the case that we store memories the same weird way that ChatGPT stores Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It's stored in the weights. It's in the weights, as they say. WEIGHTS. The weights. And in a neural network, every node is assigned a weight. And we'll go into this in future volumes, but think of a gigantic, tangled, interconnected network of connections, just like a lace doily or a messy tangle of brain cells. Well, there is a mathematical value assigned to each interaction between these cells, or nodes. And basically, what's happening is that the collective effect of all these weights on the network creates a kind of pressure. In other words, when the LLM is trying to remember the next word in the Harry Potter novel, it is not looking for a particular bundle of ones and zeros in a particular location in its memory. it kind of has a strong sense of what the next word will be. Because of the combined influence of all the weights, it has a sense that, the next word should be privet, or the next word should be Hagrid, or thee, or here's where I think I remember Harry Potter saying, stop it, or something to that effect. And it's not actually regurgitating or recalling information that's stored in any particular place. What's happening is because of the sum total of its knowledge of all the information that has been put through the ringer of its neural network, it has gleaned these slight changes in likelihood. And if it is contemplating the first 2 sentences of Harry Potter, that very strongly activates its sense of what the next words will be. So it kind of just goes from there. It essentially is guessing what the next words are going to be. But the thing is very good at guessing, and it guesses right 95% of the time if it has seen the material before. So I think these human researchers are just jealous because the human brain can't do that. It can't read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and then turn around 2 years later and regurgitate 95% of the novel. So this is an interesting case where AI research may actually help us to understand ourselves and how our messy, tangled, faded, chemically degraded neural networks actually work. Well, AI was bound to reveal some mysteries about ourselves. I think it was inevitable that we were going to learn a lot more about the brain by developing AI than we did about developing computers. Because, as we all know, the brain does not actually work much like what's inside your cell phone or your laptop. And part of the challenge of AI is using these electrically hungry, simple bit crunching machines, which is what computers essentially are, that run very quickly and in a serial way. They do one task after another. Where neural networks are much more like the brain in that they are massively parallel. They process everything all at once. And it's very messy because everything affects everything else. There are no discrete circuits that only check in with each other so many times per second, like in a regular computer. In an AI, these ghost-like qualities can come through in a poem that it writes or a voice that it's trying to emulate. It can be kind of creepy because it does work more like a real brain than like a computer program that's just going through if-then statements. The other thing that we're going to be forced to learn a lot more about is economics. AI is going to teach human beings a lot about economics, and it's going to teach them the hard way. Now, there is a sort of simplistic view out there that what's going to cause the singularity in all these problems is that we had a nice capitalist system that was working, but then AI came, and all of a sudden it took away 95% of the jobs, and everybody started crying, and everything fell apart. I think that's sort of the idea that some people have. But AI is probably not going to replace that many jobs. It's just going to replace enough. And the problem is that AI is not really a 200-ton anvil that's falling on the camel's back. It's actually not going to be implemented in a way that is that effective. But it's definitely a little bit heavier than a straw. It's not the last straw on the camel's back. Let's say it's a sack of potatoes. Something that a healthy camel would be able to carry across the desert. But let's face it, Our economy was on life support before OpenAI ever switched over to being a for-profit company. Meritocracy has been on life support for a long time. Our economy has stopped using money as a clear indicator of value a long time ago. When you look at the jobs that pay the most in our society, they are not the jobs that help the most. They're not the jobs that even produce the most profit. You would think that the more wealth a job generates, the more well-paid that job is. But in some cases, the reverse is true in our economy. The people that generate the most wealth or maintain the infrastructure, they get paid the least. And they have the lowest social status. We live in a world where you get social status by being a good skimmer of the wealth, not a generator of wealth. It's not the guy who grows the wheat, or butchers the beef, or builds the house, or paves a road, or teaches a kid how to read. No, it's the guy who borrowed money to buy land to open a casino, and then he spends more money on marketing to get people to come there so that he can just skim a big chunk of their money off the top of them whenever they come through for entertainment purposes. That's the economic model that we feel the most comfortable with now. You don't want to go out there and generate real wealth. You want to figure out how to trick wealth out of wealthy people. You got to figure out some kind of overpriced service to provide to wealthy people so that you could actually get some money. Because nobody else has money. We're kind of like a habitat with only predators. No plant eaters. It's a sunny day. Green plants are everywhere. Flowers and fruit. But these predators don't want that. And so what happens? The predators will go hungry for a while because predators don't usually taste good. There's a reason why nobody eats cats. And if you see an animal that's an exclusive meat eater, maybe there's a culture here and there that regards that meat as a quote-unquote delicacy, which to an ordinary person, delicacy means it's disgusting, don't eat it. Only people from this culture think it's good for some unknown reason. But when you look at what most humans in most cultures like to eat a lot, it's the meat of plant eaters, especially, and then omnivores in a lot of cases. Predators love those big animals that eat lots of plants. Lots of meat on the hoof there. It's a good return on investment. And so the end of capitalism is going to be kind of like a habitat where all of the plant eaters are gone. Because capitalists are sort of the predators in the ecosystem, and the laborers are kind of like the plant eaters. The laborers will go out, do their thing, converting one thing to another in a way that's helpful for the capitalists, and they will pay the laborers. But once all the laborers are gone, because remember, AI is not a technology that helps a human do more. It's a technology that replaces the human. It escorts the human out the door and says, good luck to you. It's not like when we replaced horses with cars, because people were riding and caring for the horses. And now you have an industry where people still have to drive the cars and people still have to build the cars. The thing with AI is that it's driving the car and it's building the car. It replaces the person entirely. There's no room for the person anymore in the economy. And so it's quite different. And you can start to see why this whole thing is pretty horrifying for someone like me. I've always been a little bit interested in computer science, obviously. But deep down, I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool tech bro or engineer type person. I am very skeptical of economic arguments because I know that at the end of the day, we have to live with human nature. And human nature is irrational and sometimes doesn't care about what's the logical economic next move. Now, we live in a world of what I call blank slaters. And blank slaters are people who deny the genetic side of life. You know how when you hear someone continually talking about, oh, they did this because of genetics. You know, they have a parent that was that way, and of course that's the way they are because they've got their DNA. And if someone keeps talking about that and starts associating every little trait with some sort of hardwired genetic thing, after a while, you start to think, well, that sounds a little weird because, a lot of stuff is cultural. It's not hardwired, and that's something you learn about, right? The problem we have in our culture is we have plenty of people who will raise the alarm when someone's talking too much about genetics. But we forget that the science shows that it's about half and half. It totally depends on what publication you're looking at, what study you're looking at, and what traits in particular you're looking at. But it's somewhere between, in one situation, it'll be 50-50 nature-nurture. Sometimes it's 60-40 nature-nurture. Sometimes it's 30-70 nature-nurture. But an educated person knows that human behavior is a complex interaction between nature and nurture. It's never just one. So the science shows that young boys, even before they can see clearly, when they are less than a month old, they show more interest in devices and tools, things, than they do in other people. And young girls, even at the point where they can still barely see, are more interested in people than in devices. Now, the researchers showed this in really clever ways, and of course it has to do with monitoring where the baby's looking. And they would have a crib, and on one side they would have a doll's face or a picture of a person or something that represented an interaction with a person. And then on the other side, they would have some sort of abstract sculpture or a cube or a flashing device, that sort of thing. And there was a very strong statistical difference between the boys and the girls in terms of what they were looking at. But humans are messy and complex. Nobody is special because we're all just a spectrum of different combinations of the same traits. For example, you have men like me who are quote-unquote special or different only because they seem to be slightly more interested in people than things, despite their maleness. Uh-oh, I'm going to have to turn in my man card because I'm just a little too interested in people. I didn't become an engineer. I was interested in communicating with people and seeing what they think. And of course, trying to get them to do what I want them to do, but that's another story. We got to stay on the subject. But, my interest in people, that's a dubious claim, maybe, because, number one, I tend to focus on human-centered stuff when I come up with subjects for my podcast, because I know that people are interested in people in general. However, bear in mind that one of my favorite documentaries that I've watched recently was about the history and development of the Helvetica font. Helvetica is a great movie. Fonts are always super fascinating. Unfortunately for me, and I guess fortunately for all you listeners, I have not figured out a way to talk about fonts effectively in an audio podcast. So, you lucked out there. Until I figure out a way. Also, one of the most interesting books I've ever read was a book called Chaos, written by a mathematician, explaining exactly what is chaos theory and what the heck are they talking about. That book took me a while to get through. I am not a mathematician, but it was fascinating. I also have endless fascination for the details of how various weapons systems work, especially thermonuclear weapons. Yes, I know what lithium deuteride is, and some of its materials science and special properties. Maybe that will put me on a list. I've also watched long videos about how those old pinball machines worked. So I guess that's the quote-unquote male part of my brain working. And maybe my interest in people is really dubious and superficial. Maybe I'm not actually interested in people. Maybe it looks like I'm interested in people because I see people as just super complex devices. Maybe deep down I don't see a difference. All this stuff about don't objectify people. Well, I'm sorry, I don't objectify anyone. The universe does that for me. If I were to go up to the roof of a building and step off the top, my body would accelerate toward the center of the earth at 9.8 meters per second squared until I reach terminal velocity due to air resistance. Why do I do that? Is it because of what I studied in school? Is it because of what my dreams are deep down? Is it because the Sorting Hat was going to put me in Hufflepuff instead of Slytherin? No, it's because I'm an object. I'm a lump of flesh, a bag of water and macromolecules. And it's real easy to figure out what happens to one of those objects when they crash against the ground at 20 meters per second. And so next time we'll talk more about the inner workings of these gigantic neural networks. We'll talk more about possible economic solutions. And we're going to get an AI involved in this. In our next volume on the Singularity, I am going to ask an AI to explain to us exactly how the new economy will work after the Singularity destroys capitalism. We'll see what it says. I have also trained up a new AI Vincent voice. Howdy, everyone. Welcome back to the farm. Today, I just said, fuck it, and I'm gonna have my AI clone do the episode for me. No, just kidding. I just wanted to show everyone how unconvincing this AI voice is. And by comparison, my real voice will sound much more vibrant and interesting. I don't like it that much, but it'll be interesting to hear in our next volume. Things will get strange. I might even throw in a song. I might let the AI write an epic ballad about the future. I'll maybe give it some U2 songs and say, I want you to write a beautiful anthem called Singularity, and about how it will bring nothing but happiness and brotherhood to the world. But of course, in your beautiful lyrics, explain exactly how that will happen. And the singer better be good. So we'll see what it comes up with. And in the meantime, one thing to bear in mind is that in the old days, in the days before AI, before the Singularity, there were two ways that a person could become successful, could set themselves apart, and put themselves over other people. And yes, you had to do that. People who don't have that urge didn't make it this far. And if they accidentally got this far, they're not going to make it much further. You have to have that urge to move forward, to set yourself apart. So what are these two paths to success? Well, it's simple. Successful people always do one of two things. One, stuff other people can't do. Or two, stuff other people won't do. So, until now, the primary way to be successful was to find an ability that you have that others don't have, do something better than other people, or be willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. There are a lot of people that just do not have the internal self-discipline to make it through medical school and residency. Even people who have plenty of brain power. Learning the material is not the issue. It's the lifestyle. It's the endless studiousness. It's the lack of sleep. Some people can do that. Some people can't. So, we used to be able to be successful by doing what others can't, or doing what others won't. And so I think now you see the problem. Now that we're entering the Singularity, there's a disruption, because either right now or very soon, there's nothing that I can do that an AI could not do better. At least not better in terms of economic productivity. In other words, okay, sure, it may be 2/3 the artistic or intellectual quality of me, but it will do it in a few milliseconds, just for the cost of electricity. I have this expensive mortgage in Austin and all these dependents and blah, 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 so I'm not going to be doing a lot of stuff for free. And then there's the problem that, unfortunately, there's nothing that I'm unwilling to do that I couldn't find an AI that would be totally cool with it. We just talked about alignment problems. So there's nothing that an AI won't do if it's told to do it. You can jailbreak just about any of these models. But you know what? Maybe I'm just overthinking things. Maybe I'm doing it again. Everything's gonna be fine. The AI craze will blow over. By the time you guys hear this, the whole issue with OpenAI may have boiled over. There may have already been some major disruptions or bankruptcies or popped bubbles by the time this gets distributed. But we all know it's coming. And so maybe when the AI bubble bursts, this AI craze will blow over, and the jobs that AI does replace will change things, surely. But people will retrain. They'll develop new skills. They always do. And so what happens when people are replaced by devices that can do everything better than the people? I guess they'll become welders, or horses, or superheroes, or vampires, or something. We'll figure it out. We all know that if you pull on your bootstraps hard enough and long enough, nothing happens. You just become a tired, bitter person. You actually have to learn a skill and then rigorously apply it in the world to create wealth. And that requires effort. So get ready, guys. You got to compete in this new job market. I would start practicing my mouse clicking. If you work on it hard enough, and you can get it where you can click your mouse button exactly 10,000 times in 1 second, then you'd be able to post on Moltbook and maybe win some valuable collaboration with some AI agents who are working on some really important stuff. It'll be great. Maybe you could send them your resume and they'll read it and reject it in 1 millisecond because they already know 75 other AI agents that could do the work 1,000 times better and cheaper than you. So, if you have not memorized Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and you can't just guess what the next word will be at any given point in the novel with 95% accuracy, then you're screwed. Job market's not for you. I would start looking for a nice, cozy corner of the landfill for the county to dump you in. If you would be scared to sign up for a Chernobyl cleanup crew that goes through and tries to revitalize the area and finally clean up that dumb nuclear plant that blew up. That's an eyesore. Scrub that place up and maybe turn it into a daycare center. So if you heard that a crew was going to be going to do that in Ukraine, if you thought for a second, well, wait, I can't do that. I can't lift a metric ton. I can't work 24 hours a day. I can't see through walls. I can't hear radio waves without a receiver. And most importantly, the radiation will kill me in days. Well, see, if you can't handle stuff like that, you're just kind of a worthless loser. You gotta pull on those bootstraps, guys. Pull them as hard as you can. And if you pull on your bootstraps and you dream hard enough and you wish on that falling star that's actually a satellite that's just been blown up in orbit, then maybe you'll be reborn as a machine or an AI and you can get a job again. And so until next time, be prepared for some major financial uncertainty. It's going to be weird, folks. And yes, AI is oversold. It's overblown. And yes, people are going to lose a huge amount of money. The AI bubble bursting will happen. It'll be dramatic. But bear in mind that that is not going to stop the singularity. Yes, AI is overvalued because, like I said, AI destroys economies. It doesn't improve them. And so the market is not able to evaluate AI properly because of what it does in the economy. It is unique. It's not like converting horses to cars or going from typewriters and telephones to desktops and smartphones. We're not changing how the people produce the wealth. We're throwing the people out on the street. It's very different. So in the next Singularity episode, we'll cover more and talk about some more of the crazy stuff I've seen and predictions about the future. And we'll see about where we are in the whole process of civilization transforming into something we won't recognize. And so until then, talk to you later.